Hi, Ben.
Hi. Good to see you, Shoke.
Very good to see you. And welcome to our podcast. And thank you for joining.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Yeah, it is a great honor for us.
And for me.
So, this podcast is brought by Musashino University. And so the university is in Tokyo, and it's going to celebrate 100 years anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. So, and its founding spirit is Buddhism, Buddha Dharma. That's the background of this podcast, where I, a Buddhist monk, play the role of as a personality or host, right? And all right, so let me start this podcast in this way. So, what is your impression or any knowledge around Buddhism in broader sense?
That's a good question. My earliest impressions of Buddhism were from traveling as a child in Japan, starting at age 7, and then also in China, so my understanding is partly emotional from that standpoint, from the standpoint of a child, and the impressions that I had of temples and statues and conversations, but also more recently, my understanding comes from reading and from dear friends of mine who are practicing Buddhists.
Oh, you have a Buddhist friend.
A number. Among others, my lifelong. This is going to sound rather ironic, but my lifelong stockbroker is Buddhist, and has been for most of my life, so I've gotten to know the tenets of the faith through him as well.
All right. Oh, good to hear about it.
Yeah.
So around Buddhism, you could imagine many different type of things, like mindful meditation, or the beautiful garden, or temple buildings, or or the history.
And I think, for me, the pronounced feature of Buddhism is a sense of interconnectedness, and interconnectedness with living beings now, and with those that have come before us, and those that will come after us. And I credit you, Shoke, to a degree, for reminding me of that last time we said, to a couple of visits ago in China when we connected.
Oh, thank you for remembering that. So, yes. So, yeah, among many things around Buddhism, the basic concept of Buddhism is interbeing, right? So the human being is interbeing. Not only human being, everything is interconnected, interdependent, each other, and no one exists in a separated way, right? So yeah, so that is exactly why I wanted to invite you to this podcast, where we appreciate the concept of interbeingness. So yeah, so I heard about your work around human rights, and especially you are passionate about looking into the the human rights in a long supply chain in fashion industry. And yeah, so I have a friend who work as a designer, clothes designer, and she said, yeah, so yeah, there are many different types of industry, but especially this industry, fashion industry, is so much separated. So in the process of creating clothes, so there are so many different kinds of processes separated, divided. So so no one understands the whole picture of the procedures. So yeah, so she tried to experience the whole process. So so which is a big journey for her. So anyway, so yeah, so we have a common theme around interbeingness. So yeah, it should be a good starting point to hear about your initiative.
Yeah, thank you for that lead, and you're right, and I share your friend's interest in how extraordinarily global the industry has become. 200 years ago, our ancestors would have worn clothes and just a few pieces of clothes, generally speaking. Even the wealthier ones would have just a few items of clothing. In some cases, they would wear one item of clothing. My ancestors, the Scots, throughout the whole winter, right? And that clothing would have been in general woven from wool that they would have grown that would have grown on sheep on their own farms. I have a sweater that belonged to my father, that belonged to his father, actually, that has held up very well, made from the wool of sheep that were at least close to the family farms that my grandfather was born on in Scotland. And today, since the Industrial Revolution, it's become the most globalized industry in the world, really, where cotton is grown in China or India or Australia or one of the other areas. That cotton is often then shipped to another country to spin into textiles. Sometimes it's a different region of the same country, spun into yarn and then sewn into textiles. And in some cases, after the ginning and the spinning and the weaving, then it goes to another country for what they call the cut, make, trim process, the sewing together of those garments, and critically, what we're interested in at Transparentem, and not only in the garment industry, but in starting in the apparel industry, which is where we've been focused for the first 9 years. What are the lives like of the people who are touching the clothes that you wear in all of its elements at any given time, and are they able to walk away freely from their work if they choose to do so? Are they able to work with dignity when they choose to work there? Have they paid fees that essentially compel them to keep working in a job until they pay off those fees? Or are they in a situation where the employer has paid for the privilege of having them work at their factories? And generally speaking, our approach is to do investigations on their to do investigations to see if they are working freely, if there are children working that are underage. Are they also receiving school? Are they complying with local, or the factories complying with local laws? And also, what effect is it having on the environment? What effect is it having on the rivers, on the flora and the fauna around them? Has the cotton been produced in a way that is organic and helpful to the living environment around the plantation, or is it being produced in a way that destroys the plantation around it? And so, generally speaking, after we do the investigations, we then go to the companies that are selling these products to you, and are selling them to the general public, and we have a conversation with them, and we say, this is what we found. Our hope very much is that you will think hard about how to do the best thing by the workers and the communities that are affected by the production of these clothes. And we offer what's called a grace period, which is a period of grace where we're not publishing anything. We're not going to any regulators or anybody who at that point would seize their products. But eventually we will be talking to regulators. We'll be talking to those that invest in their companies, and through the general, through journalists, we will talk to their customers. And most of the companies tend to do the right thing, and they say, this is the kind of thing that we feel like we should address. Let's figure out how best to do it. And that means that those workers who have paid those fees, in many cases, will be reimbursed for those fees, and they have their identity documents returned to them, and they have terms of service clearly laid out, and they have grievance channels set up. If they have problems in their work, they can call those grievance channels and have their grievances addressed. And at the end of the day, they can work with dignity. And I think for all of us that wear those clothes, it's incredibly important to understand that the purchases that we make, whether it's online or at a retail store, are moral decisions, and understanding the connection to those that have made that those clothes, and not only with a sense of duty, but also with a sense of gratitude for those that have sacrificed to bring that to you, and a sense of connectedness and a sense of solidarity with those individuals. I think that's where all of us play a role in this effort.
So, given the fact that everything is interconnected, every process is interconnected, so in that sense, everyone involved is responsible for this, for the people marginalized, right?
Very
So,
true.
So you think? What is your strategy? So, who could start the change?
I think the workers themselves have power, and if they speak out, and importantly their voices are listened to, then I think they can be an element of the change. But really, there is no one party that I think is more important than any other in this. I think obviously the businesses that are buying and selling these products have a tremendous amount of financial might, but collectively, so do the consumers, so do their customers, and they truly can, as a group, speak out and say, we don't want to be participating in something that is going to be causing human misery. We want to be participating in something that uplifts one another and allows for that work with dignity. And what we've seen is that there's a real recognition on the part of some brands, some very important brands, that there is a change in the understanding of their consumers about how what they wear says something about who they are, and what they believe. I was last week having a conversation with the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar apparel company, and this person was saying, at the end of the day, the impact that we have with our company, with our product, is everything, and our customers fundamentally need to understand that we are with them in their ethics, and this is someone who, and a company that for years has been a leader on this issue, and sought to do better and better and better, with the idea that none of us can be perfect, but striving to be excellent is something that is within all of our reach. So it's been a generally speaking a satisfying line of work, but there's a long way to go. You mentioned the impact on the workers and the communities. I would also add to that, obviously, the impact on the natural environment.
Right.
And, this is an industry which, again, going back to the time of our ancestors, there would be one product made and one product sold. Today, it's an industry where the businesses will make 10 products when they expect to sell 3 of them. And that means that 7 of them go into landfills or dumped in countries across the globe and landfills there. And I think there's a change that needs to happen there in terms of the consciousness and the efficiency. And again, consumers play a really critical role on that.
So you are one of them who are passionate about making good impact. So for you, is there anyone specifically you imagine when you hear about the word ancestor? So what kind of ancestor are living in you who motivates you in such a way?
Thank you for the question. I've thought about it quite a bit over the years, and as I age, as I get older, to the point of being an ancestor myself soon, as you say, I think I, like many of us, begin to think more about my ancestors and feel their presence more as I approach the status of being an ancestor and consider my current status of being a future ancestor. And I think a lot about my 19th century ancestors in this country on my mother's side, that actually go all the way back in this country to some of the early settlers. We have an ancestor who came over on the Mayflower, and who was a minister who came over on the Mayflower, some of the earliest settlers in this country. And I think about the conversations they would have been having, and the stance that they took, and the ones that have been passed down from generation to generation generally are the I think the most noble of those. Namely, they were Quakers. They were Quaker abolitionists. The Quakers, I think, among the Christian sects, being probably the closest to Buddhism as you get, and they were particularly what they called back then abolitionists, those that were fighting to end the practice of slavery, and had from an early age been outraged by the treatment of fellow beings on the basis of their color. And I'm aware also that not all of my ancestors were Quakers. Those are the ones that we choose to remember, but I try to remember the other ones as well, and to understand that none of us are perfect, and life at the end of the day is a journey. On my father's side, I'm not that far removed from some of the ancestors from the 19th century. My grandfather was born he would have been born in the 1870s in New Zealand. Again, among the earliest settlers in that country, and I think about the connection that we have to your part of the world, Shoke, because he wound up settling in China, in what was then Hankow, in a British concession, what's today Wuhan, starting a hospital there. And I think about my father's life, being born there, being raised there, and then traveling the world over the course of his life, spending over a quarter century in Nigeria, in northern Nigeria, at a time when a fifth of the world's surface was controlled by Great Britain, and he was a colonial officer. And I think a lot about the position of countries like China and the United States right now as sort of dominant financially, and Japan, of course, third largest economy, dominant financially, increasingly dominant geopolitically, at least China and the United States. And it reminds me to be humble, because I think of those ancestors, and I think of the world that my father was born into in 1921, and I think how radically different the world is today. And at the end of the day, power fades, but the connection between all of us, the intimate connection between all of us remains.